There's Kevin with the Rogue Market here with this week's episode of the Rogue Roundup, a series in which I give my picks on Legacy, Standard, Commander, Pauper, and even Modern for cards that I think are going to go up. Starting off this week, we are going to pick a Standard card. We have the Pro Tour just around the corner, and if you look at the MTGO list, there is a deck that is really starting to stand out, and this is Mono Blue. Mono Blue used to be the budget deck of choice, but now it is actually a tier 1 deck. And the price of these cards spiked up just because it was a budget deck. Now I'm thinking that it is still a budget deck with the ability of it to be maybe the Pro Tour winner or one of the most played decks at the Pro Tour. There is a lot of chance that these cards in this deck are going to go up significantly. So for the card in this deck that I'm going to pick is the Tempest Djinn. Tempest Djinn is currently at about $1.50 to $2 according to TCG market price. And if you look at the card Kingdom buy list price, it is already at $1.50. So the spread is razor thin. Usually when the spread of cards like this are razor thin, something has to give. Either the buy list has to come down or the market price has to go up. And in my opinion, with this card trending up, it's going to be the market price is definitely going to start trending up as vendors are already starting to sell this card around the $3 mark. Keep in mind you don't have the longest time for this to accrue value as we are going to be going into rotation season here where everything starts to crash across the board just as vendors start to get out of cards in anticipation for rotation. I do think that Tempest Djinn is safe from the Challenger deck 2.0s coming out in April, as when this deck was when it first started to see competitive play as a budget deck, there wasn't enough money in the deck to create anything that was worthwhile in it as far as a Challenger deck product. Usually when they created Challenger decks, they looked at about a $100 budget, and this deck was sitting around $50 at the time period. Now it looks like Mono Blue across the board is about $85, and I do think that the deck will be over the $100 if it performs well at the Pro Tour. So Tempest Djinn I think is a very, very solid pickup at this moment. Next up we have Commander. Commander for this week I'm going to pick Mystical Tutor, especially the foils from the signature spellbook Jace. So this card has been trending down, 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 and I believe it is now flatlined out around the $7 mark. Mystical Tutor sees a whopping 30,000 plus decks in Commander, and if any of you have followed this series for a while, that is a ton of play in Commander. For a price point like this, especially a specialty product like this signature spellbook Jace's, where you have a 1 out of 8 chance of getting a foil Mystical Tutor, I think the price point is way too low for this card, and I'd be picking up these cards quite aggressively. When this card first came out the gates, it actually held about a $40 price tag before we knew the exact amount of signature spellbook Jace decks out there, and has crashed all the way down to $7. This card also sees play in Vintage, but is really Commander that is the demand for this card. And like I said, this can go into so many different Commander decks, current ones, future ones. It is just a very, very powerful tutor. In Commander, the name of the game is Tutors. It allows you to reduce the variance and find the pieces you want. So usually Commander players are known for foiling out their decks, and I think that this version, this foil Jace's signature spellbook, in the scope of things in the future will be one of the more demanded versions of this card. So getting it at $7, I think is pretty smart. The spread is quite bad right now. A lot of vendors aren't picking this up for anything over $3. However, I think that once the signature spellbooks do finally run out of supply, which it's starting to get there if you look at Amazon and eBay, these are still going near around MSRP, but you can't find any for extremely good deals anymore. So signature spellbook Jace, Mystical Tutor is my pick for this week for the Commander. Next up, we have Modern. Modern, I am going to stick to the foil premises here and pick Thought Scour as the foil. If you've been noticing in Modern, we have decks that use Arclight Phoenix have started to take over a huge share of the meta, and it also seems to be that the blue version is outperforming the mono-red version of the Phoenix. So this particular version uses Thing of the Ice, and it also runs 4 of Thought Scours. We also have Death Shadow that is also in a similar position as the Arclight Phoenix, with the other versions of Death Shadow starting to give way for the more blue version. The blue version of Death Shadow also uses 4 Thought Scours. So for this reason, when the number 1 and number 2 deck are all running 4 of the same cards, I think that the cards contained in them are going to go up. Thought Scour, of course, is a common, though, that has a lot of supply from both Dark Ascension, as well as a dual deck, as well as being printed recently in Iconic Masters. But the foil versus non-foil is really close compared to how much this sees play. If you compare other cards in Modern that had reprints as foils in Master sets, they tend to have more than a $2 price tag, which is what Scour is going for right now. And so with the sheer demand of this card that eventually people foiling out their Phoenix decks, I think this card will easily break the $3 barrier. If we actually look at buy list price, it's already going for about $1.50 on various vendors. So the spread between the $2 and $1.50 is already razor thin. And I think, again, something's got to give, and this card will go up in value shortly within the next few months, especially if there is a Pro Tour that runs Modern and we get a lot of eyes on Scour. This card could just go through the roof for the foil versions. Next up, we have Pauper. I think Pauper as a format is going to become more investable again with all the eyes that are going to be on it at Los Angeles for the Mythic Cup qualifier. So for this week, I'm going to pick one of the cards that is contained in arguably the best deck right now in Pauper, the Boros Monarch, and is also a sideboard choice for many decks. In fact, many decks even splash for this card, and that card is Electrickery. Electrickery foils in particular have started to go down since they were reprinted in the Guilds of Ravnica guild kits, and this doesn't make any sense to me because it's a normal version that was reprinted in their guild kits. That shouldn't have an effect on the foil price. However, the foil price has crashed all the way from 7 down to about 3. I think the foils are going to rebound if Pauper is going to rebound as a format, as this card sees a ton of play in Pauper. Boros Monarch decks usually pack about 2 to 4 between the main and the sideboard, as it is a good card against elves or as other token mirrors. Currently, what I like most about Electrickery foils is there is pretty much a non-existent spread. Card Keenum, for example, is paying $2.50 for the foil copies, and TCG Market Price is also selling between the $2.50 and $3. Like I said before, something always has to give when there is relatively no spread between buy list and market price. That leaves us with Legacy. For this week, I'm going to pick another one of those double dippers, and this double dipper is Omniscience. Omniscience sees a lot of play in both Sneak and Show and Omni Show, and it also is one of the most played blue cards in Commander. What I like most about Omniscience is that it was a mythic from Core Set 2019. This has been printed a bunch of times throughout the history of Magic, but many of those have been either promos or M13, and I think that Core Set 2019 is finally positioned to start going up in value. We saw Crucible of Worlds already start to increase in value, and Omniscience I don't think will be far behind. This card has a lot of demand from both of those formats. Omniscience also occasionally sees play in Modern, but that's really not our focus. Legacy, as a 4-of, I think eventually will make this card go back up in value, and Commander, being a very popular card, of course makes this a knockout of the park. Omniscience currently has one of those spreads that we've talked about that is very lucrative, with Card Keenum paying $4.50 for it, and a TCG market price of this around the $5 to $5.50 mark. I think that M19 is not going to be opened anymore. It was kind of a dismal set in the scope of things, being sandwiched in between Dominaria and Ixalan. And out of even Rivals of Ixalan, I believe that Core Set 2019 was the least opened set from this standard season. I think getting an Omniscience at about the $4 mark is a steal if you can find people to sell at that, and it is my #1 pick for this week. I hope you enjoyed this list of cards from this week's episode of the Rogue Roundup. Be sure to check back next week, or if you're a fan of this type of financial content, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. What are your 5 cards you're going to be investing in? Be sure to check out my other channel over at roguedeckbuilder.com for our weekly Market Monday episode. Thanks for watching.